It's time for booting up. Tonight, we are talking to a guest who is a software engineer at Thinkful and is formerly from Thinkful, graduating from the engineering program. Before that, he was a pro squash player. And to be honest, I'm not sure exactly the rules of the sport, but he will let us know in just a minute. So if it's your first time joining, we're about to go for about 45 minutes an hour. Feel free to write your questions at any time in the chat. We will answer them all. And subscribe so you can see all our amazing guests that we're going to have this season, so you can learn about how to get a job in tech and other sort of secrets for early careers in tech. All right, so let's bring on our guest for the evening. Sam, how's it going? Where are you joining us from today?
Hi, it's good. Thanks for having me, Rod. I'm calling from San Francisco.
San Fran. So that's where the office for Twitter is?
Yeah, so Twitter office is I work out of our SF office, and sort of am continuing and hoping to work a couple days in office. Can't wait to be back with colleagues, be able to ask questions.
Yeah. Well, so you're going in a couple days already?
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
Just dreaming of it.
Just making sure. And then, were you from there before, or you moved there initially when you got your job?
So I moved there not for the job. I actually was living in Boston when I was playing pro squash, and my fiance got a job out here, and I'd sort of been dealing with some back issues and thought it was a good time to hang up the racket and get a big boy job. And that began the sort of year-long transition as I figured out what was next, and then tried to make my transition into tech.
No, it makes sense. So yeah, let's start with the squash. So start from there. So I saw on your LinkedIn, you were basically playing squash professionally for 3 years or even longer?
3 years.
Okay. So tell me first, for everyone in the audience, what does squash entail?
So squash is like indoor tennis. If you know racquetball, it's pretty similar, except the ball doesn't bounce as much. And so it's a game, simple game. You and your opponent alternate hitting a ball. Ball can't bounce twice, and you go until either somebody hits it out of court or it bounces twice. It's built on, because the ball is softer and bounces less than, say, a racquetball or a tennis ball, it is a lot more patient of a game and a lot more about building rallies and waiting for that opportunity to take a chance and go for it.
That makes sense. And then I'm guessing you got into that probably pretty young, and then you grew into that, right?
I was actually super late to the game. I picked it up in high school. My high school required everyone to play a sport every season, and I decided I was no good at basketball, and why not try this new random game, squash, and see what happens. And just fell in love, and just sort of couldn't get enough of the game, taking lessons, going to camps in the summer, and just sort of doing whatever I could to improve my game. Ended up getting recruited, playing in college, doing that whole circuit. Really was just sort of grounding experience for those 8 years of the end of my academic career.
Yeah. Just being in the team environment, I think it really preps you, especially for later on when you're working in, a tech team. So just camaraderie, working for the greater good. So it probably helps shape you. But you were working, so you're basically playing professional squash. And then what was kind of the thing that was leading you towards going towards tech initially?
I think tech had always intrigued me. I went to Stanford. So I was in the Bay Area for undergrad, and was intrigued by the prospect. Had a lot of friends who worked in tech, who founded companies, who did the whole thing. And I admit, sort of when I was 20, 21, I was super intimidated by it. I felt like if you weren't all in, if you didn't learn to code when you were 5, it was not the career for you. If you wanted to take a computer science class, you needed to be all in on it because they were the hardest classes anyone could take, and you needed to be doing linear algebra and multivariable calculus while you were doing. I just had these sort of built up notions of what computer science must be. And so I stayed away, but I was 20, how old was I? 27 when I moved back to the Bay Area from Boston with my fiance. And I admit, coming to San Francisco, sort of knowing I didn't want to keep playing squash, felt like, well, what learning opportunities are there? And being in San Francisco, as I started having conversations with friends and friends of friends, careers in tech continued to pop up as the place where the best learning was in the community where I was. And the experiences of what the engineers I talked to, how they described both their day-to-day and their career progressions, the more excited that lifestyle became to me as one that is based on a growth mindset where you are trying to get better every day and constantly trying to improve and learn new things. And it's not about sort of getting a defined set of skills, but instead about continuing to learn and grow. And I thought that was a really exciting way to approach the day-to-day. It felt a lot like squash in that every day you're just trying to be 1% better than you were the day before. And it's an ambitious goal and often you don't hit it, but it felt like something that could really keep me engaged for a long time.
Yeah, like there's endless opportunities. So like even if you start in tech, you could take that tech experience and do a bunch of different things. You see marketers that need to know about software development. You see business people that sell into software development companies. So no matter what, I think getting to tech is always a great decision, at least for, even a few years. So once you decided, hey, I want to go down this path, what drew you to boot camps and then Thinkful specifically?
So I definitely, it took some conversations with friends who had gone through boot camps to see that it really was a path into the industry. And there was the piece of me that was sort of hesitant to jump into something like that, feeling like, well, you've got to have the credentials and you've got to sort of have the pedigree to get these jobs. And as I was talking to people, what became abundantly clear was there are some people who sort of look for that when they're hiring, but there is a large swath within the engineering community and tech community as a whole who care about, can you do the job? And are excited about people who are self-taught or people who come from boot camp backgrounds and got into it because later in life they sort of, or whenever in life, they found this passion and they wanted to learn to do it. And it wasn't just like well, I'm getting my degree, I'm just sort of following the track, but instead it was the active choice to take on this new challenge. And so I think in those conversations, a boot camp started to feel like a viable option. And then it came down to which boot camp. And I think being in the Bay Area, there were a number of in-person boot camps I considered, talked to some people who'd gone to different ones. And I would say there are two reasons I went with Thinkful. One is sort of the personal one of I really wanted to get a dog. And sort of not a great reason to make a professional decision, but I wanted to get a dog. Yeah. And this allowed me to be home with him and put in the time training while I was also training myself and learning how to be an engineer. But more importantly, the Thinkful program was 5 months long, and most of the in-person boot camps I was looking at were 3 months. And
gotcha.
They both got you to about the same hours of class. The 3 months one where you were looking at like an 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. type of a day, Monday to Saturday, really just drinking from the fire hose. And Thinkful was Monday to Friday. For me, it was 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And it really allowed me the space when things weren't going well, when I wasn't understanding things, to dive in deeper, to work with a mentor and really try and figure out what was wrong so I didn't fall way behind. But also on days when it clicked, which I think happens for everyone picking up a new skill. Some things are easier than others. On those days, I could just go for a walk. I could go get a coffee. I could relax, and I could just check out a little bit. And that space, I think, helped build a healthy foundation and relationship with coding, where it didn't need to be this all-consuming thing I did, but it was just a methodical sort of small step every day trying to learn how to be an engineer.
I think that's a great point to emphasize, because you see a lot of people on social media, always posting, "Hey, I love this," and everyone seems like they're always grinding and coding 24 hours a day. So it might create like this sense like you have to do that to break in. But I think the whole benefit of working in tech is, hey, it is flexible. You're going to be learning a lot and you have to keep up with things, but it's not where you have to go and, being in a factory for 10 hours a day straight. It's good for you. And then another thing you mentioned before also that I want to go down is the growing population of bootcamp grads in the industry now. So like you were mentioning how you saw people were becoming more accepting of bootcamp grads, and that was 3 years ago. So now, like, there's such a big population; those people are becoming managers, and that opens up even more opportunities for bootcamp grads.
Yeah, for sure. Within the last year and a half, Twitter started a program specifically targeted at recruiting people from non-traditional backgrounds. So looking for those bootcamp grads, those self-taught engineers who could come in and be apprentices. And really, I think we have a crop now every spring and we have a winter and a summer crop. So twice a year, like 12 to 16 engineers who start up and have this cohort where they go in together. And it was based on seeing people from non-traditional backgrounds bring a different approach that makes the product better.
Mm-hmm. Is that the apprentice program?
Yeah.
Okay. That's making sure. Yeah, I've seen a bunch of people getting into that. I was wondering if maybe there was like another secret project that was about to come out.
No, not dropping any secrets right here. That's the apprentice program.
All right, only declassified stuff already. So looking back to right before you got your job, I saw basically you graduated and then got your job right away. Was that like something you were working on, or?
So I graduated at the end of April in 2018 and started with Twitter in the first week of July that same year. And so I got signed my offer first week of June. And so there was the month of May was very stressful in that job search. Thinkful sets it up such that in the beginning of sort of your last month in the program, you start your career counseling, you start being coached on having sort of casual conversations, reaching out to friends of friends, anyone that'll sort of sit down with you, have a coffee, or in this case, have a Zoom, have a phone call. And so I began that process sort of about a month before I graduated, and ended up having Twitter come through in the beginning of June. I actually had stagnated my approach. I'd sort of said, if I can, I want to go work at a sort of blue chip tech company. I want to go work at a well-established named company, so that, this was still part of my uncertainty about the bootcamp pedigree being accepted, was like, well, if I can get a name like Twitter on my resume, then moving forward, there's going to be less questions of this, that I went to a bootcamp. And now sort of looking back on it, and sort of as I get to know more and more experience in the industry, I think I blew that out of proportion. I think my sort of anxiety and sort of elitism biased what I thought would be like the right job. And I think I closed my mind off a little bit to some other opportunities that might have been really good fits with smaller companies, where there's a bit more of a rapid pace of pushing code and a sort of rapid opportunity to learn. Just from looking at what some of my cohort mates from Thinkful have done since graduating, I still am incredibly grateful to all the learning I've been able to do at Twitter and for the team taking a chance on me. But I think I shouldn't have been so sort of closed off to the sort of reality that there are a lot of amazing places to start your career that are eager to take a chance on people from non-traditional backgrounds. And the first job's tough to get. You're going off of a couple months of coding and a boot camp maybe. But when you get that foot in the door and you have that work experience, it really does give you the chance to leverage what you know and learn a lot and continue to move up and sort of move around to projects and teams that excite you.
Yeah, no, I think, getting that first big name on your resume, I think once you do that, every door opens. People, whether it's for good or for bad, people always put, ex Twitter, ex Microsoft, ex Apple, and they do that because it's basically kind of a line of credibility. And when you're applying to jobs in the future, people are like, oh, we got a Twitter engineer. It's something that they can they can kind of brag about. But one thing you mentioned on, kind of being unsure, just being from a boot camp and being able to go into these kind of companies, how do you kind of like deal with that, like that addition to the imposter syndrome of, hey, I only have a boot camp certificate while I'm competing with these people that did 4, 5, 6-year colleges?
Yeah, I think I got some great advice when I was beginning the process from another bootcamp grad who said, like, don't go in there and try and compete on coding alone. Don't go in there on your technical expertise. No matter how good you think you've gotten in your bootcamp, like the people who have been doing this for 6, 10 years that have come through undergraduate programs, they're going to know more than you, but they don't have your life experience. So I got in there and I talked a lot about what I learned playing squash. I talked a lot about sort of the grit that it took to be on the pro tour and how unglamorous it was. And I brought my whole self to that interview and tried to sell them on who I was and said, look, in the technical interviews, I can show you what I can do. Or that's the goal, at least. A good technical interview is going to let someone do that. And by sort of putting that best foot forward, then they can decide, do we see potential there? Do we see someone, you're a little rough around the edges, you maybe don't have the technical experience, but are we excited about the engineer you could become based on what you've accomplished for me in 6 months of coding, plus a lifetime of learned experiences and lived experiences?
Yeah, it's a competitive advantage. If you look at the usual college grad, they're coming straight out of high school, do 4 years, graduate, and they have all this theory, but they've never worked in a real job before. They're kind of fresh going into any sort of company at all. But most bootcamp grads are coming with previous job experience, or maybe they even got a degree in another field. So that kind of wider view makes you stand out. And then also, again, you mentioned learning a brand new field in 5, 6, even 3 months. Like, that's a crazy transition. It's a mental shift that you have to make. So yeah, definitely anybody that hears this, like, know that you have something special. Yeah. So during that job search also, what got you the interview with Twitter, do you think?
So I for sure had a leg up because one of my former roommates from college was a product manager at Twitter. And so he reached out to a hiring manager and said, look, like, we should give this guy a shot. I know it's not usual. And that got my foot in the door for sure. And I think it's important to know, like, in networking, like reaching out to people, it's definitely something that, like, they don't have to be an engineer at the company to, like, put your name in for a technical job. I think that was something that was important. I learned through the Thinkful process was, like, talk to people at companies, see if they can introduce you to someone else that maybe knows a bit more about the tech stack and what the work-life balance is like to answer your questions. And it just coming in as a referral, if you can do it, if you can get that warm intro, really can help have them just sort of not dismiss your application out of hand.
Yeah, no, it's always true what they say. You know, your network is your net worth, and that's how it happens. And I think one of the important things there is when you go out and network, don't go out and say, "Hey, give me this." It's more, "Hey, like, can I ask you a question about this?" And then, you know, maybe eventually you do ask for something, but you have to go in with what can I provide for them first versus what can I get for myself, which sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah, for sure. It was a months-long process. It started with just the people I was looking for referrals from were the people I was talking to 6 months before when I was thinking about starting Thinkful. It was closing that circle and saying, look, we talked about this. I'm really chasing this path down and I love it. Like, do you have any advice on the job hunt? And some were like, oh man, like, you got to apply here. Like, we'd love to have you. And others were like, well, we don't really do that here, but you know, I'm so proud of you. And here's how I can help go over your portfolio. I can run you through a mock interview. It's just super helpful. And also I reached out to a lot of Thinkful alums who were in the Bay Area, and that was something that also helped me. Someone who really had been in my shoes and knew what the process was. And I found them super receptive to just, happy to have a coffee, a lunch, a chat, share experiences. It's something I do now. I enjoy just sort of having that 20-minute chat with someone who's maybe about to start their journey, or maybe at some point in the middle of it, of just like, what can I share about my experience that might help you, and what can I learn from your experience? I think it's great to talk to people who it inspires me, I should say, every time I have a conversation about like why people are getting into tech.
Yeah, well, just so you know, you just open yourself up to a bunch of DMs coming through. So you have to get contacted by some people.
That's good.
It's great. Like, you know, you got to get back, especially when you know the struggle that people have been through. You've been there, and when you're in it, I feel like it seems like much worse. But then when you look back, you're like, it wasn't that bad. You know, it got you to where you are.
For sure.
Yeah. So awesome. So you got your Twitter job. You use networking, which everyone, again, always start networking now, not later. And then once you get into your first day, like, how is it, you know, transitioning from this quick kind of program into, hey, now I'm a professional on the job and have to deliver?
So the first day, I felt like they'd made a mistake. I was like,
never stops.
I was just like, nope, this is fun, but they're not going to pay me to do this. The first week on the job at Twitter, you go through an engineering sort of called flight school, just crash course in Twitter technology. And so I had gone through Thinkful, which has a JavaScript-based tech stack. It's full stack, but it's all JavaScript. And I got to Thinkful, and basically the entire first week we were spent only coding in Scala, which is a super performative backend language it's
tough.
It is rough. It is still kicking my butt to this day. I still am calling up teammates being like, how do you do this again? What's this? And in that first week, it was a lot of just staring around, just like, how do I do this? How does what I know apply here at all?
And there's not a lot of Stack Overflow articles for Scala.
They're not a lot. It's not a lot of good Googling I could do there. A lot of reading docs. And then it was a lot of support from a lot of mentors on my team. So my manager was super supportive. I had two guys on the team who'd connected with me, and we're really excited about helping someone from a non-traditional background break in. And what we were able to do basically was, after that first week of sort of generic onboarding, I got in with my team, and the focus was, all right, JavaScript. We like the code you're writing in that. Let's build on some of your successes and really help you become a sort of professional quality front-end developer. Okay. And so I was writing React. I was in the Redux world. I was having a great time. It's what I'd learned in bootcamp. And I spent a good 3 months, 6 months just living in that space where I was learning how to be a contributing member of the team. And I think that approach allowed me to start to feel a little bit more confident. Like, I do belong. Like, I do have things to offer to this team. Like, there is a reason they hired me. And then slowly I started working with my manager and my mentors to add responsibilities that required me to understand our back-end systems, to write Scala, to start to build on that, so that it wasn't just all right, we're going to throw you in the deep end and see if you can swim, but it was a supportive environment where they wanted to see me succeed, and we wanted to set up a plan that I could really incrementally continue to make those improvements.
Yeah, so I guess that's a big thing, is also in your first job, like having such a structured onboarding. Like, you need to start your career off right. Otherwise, I think that I've talked to some people where, they have a bad start, and that first year they're like, oh, why'd I do this? Like, do I belong here? But it sounds like they definitely have a good program. How long was like that whole thing? Was that like 6 months?
Yeah, it took about 6 months until I really felt like I was a sort of level playing field member of the team. And not that anyone treated me any differently, but that was when I was handling on-call rotations. That was when I started sort of knowing where things were and knowing how to sort of run all of the services my team managed. And though I was still more comfortable in the front end, as a team, sort of, we all fall into sort of various parts of the code base where we're more comfortable in. And so that wasn't sort of abnormal.
So how is it like that transition? Because, in bootcamp, you're working usually by yourself, maybe in a small group, and building these small products from scratch. But when you're coming into something like Twitter, like that code base has been there since 2007. There's probably a lot to like navigate. How is that? How's that work?
Yeah, it was super daunting. Thinkful actually does everything's pair programming. So when I got out, it was actually a shock the other way of, now I was writing most of my code on my own, which I came to quickly appreciate. But I do think the pairing was helpful in the learning process. But alas, I digress. I think it definitely. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
The original question was, just like, how is it, working it with a giant code base? Like,
yes. Sorry. It was building something from scratch where I could remember where everything was. That was sort of the bootcamp experience. You didn't need keyboard shortcuts. You could do it just sort of by it. I sort of equate it to, like, I could look at my fingers while typing, and that it was a manageable thing that I knew and had built up. When I got to Twitter and was looking at hundreds of thousands of lines of code and needing to find and make changes in it, quickly it became pairing with teammates, watching how they did their job, and when they did something that I didn't understand, asking them how they did it. Yeah. And so, like, even just the process of navigating the code base was its own challenge that just took time. And I think being okay just asking those questions of like, how do you sort of search all files within a repository? How do you sort of look up a definition? All these things that now are sort of common knowledge. But when I was dealing with a code base that had maybe 50 files and I'd set up the structure, I could just find it on my own.
Yeah.
And my teammates were super helpful in like sharing their different approaches. And as I started working on my own tickets, solving my own problems, I started to develop my own style and my own way of getting around and figuring out problems. But it's definitely, it's a culture shock the first time when it takes 30 minutes for this entire source repo to download onto your computer. It gives you a sense of how much is being handed over to you.
Yeah, no, that must be like the crazy part is like, hey, like people are using this right now, like millions of people are using it every single second. But you know, I guess like you have to ask for a merge request, so like you're not gonna break anything by accident.
No, and the team I joined, we were actually working on an ancillary Twitter product called Media Studio that helps brands and content publishers manage their media content.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit like, if I did something that screwed up the build, I knew it wasn't gonna be on the front page of Twitter with like Twitter down trending #1. Like some of my coworkers have been fortunate enough to do. But it was still like, I'll say there were a lot of processes in place to make sure no engineer is going to do that. And when something like that happens that brings down the site, it shouldn't, my personal opinion is that shouldn't be a failure of that one engineer, because you should be having the engineer who wrote the code, you should have at least one engineer reviewing it, usually multiple who are looking at this, making sure it's okay. You should have automated tests that are checking to make sure nothing's breaking. You should have, if you're a company the size of Twitter, you have manual testing that's making sure things aren't breaking.
Yeah.
There should be processes in place that protect against it. And because people make mistakes, and we shouldn't view making a mistake like that as a fireable offense or something that should get you in trouble. It instead should be that learning opportunity. I think when I first joined, one of the things that was like, who's going to care if you screw up? If you make the same mistake twice, people are going to start to notice.
Yeah.
If you keep making the same mistake, that's when people get frustrated.
Yeah, that's when you get noticed. One thing that I think people also think about when they come into the first job is about asking questions from their manager, because you know they don't want to ask too many because they don't want to seem like they don't know stuff or they can't handle things. But at the same time, if you don't ask any questions, you might just make mistakes and make yourself look even worse. So like in your first year, how did you kind of balance that?
I found a lot of mentors.
Within the company?
I found a lot of people I could ask questions of. I think I was definitely nervous about people thinking I didn't belong. I didn't know what I was doing. And so it was about sort of, all right, I'm going to ask this person about this stuff, and this, my desk mate about this, and my formal mentor about this, and my unofficial. And it was just about building that network within the team so that, and again, it's sort of back to what you were talking about earlier with networking. It didn't start with me just saying, look, can you tell me this? Like, I need this from you. I need this from you. It started with just building a rapport with your coworkers. And then when I had questions, they were approachable. They were sort of open to answering whatever sort of things I was struggling with without judgment. And because I could sort of spread that out amongst a team of 10, I never felt like I was too much of a burden on any person. And what's been really nice is like, starting next week, I'm actually mentoring a new member of our team and sort of getting to have that come full circle and really get to be the person that can be pestered and not worry about it. And when you're on the other side, I think, I don't know, I've never, knock on wood, but never had someone ask so many questions that I'm like, look, like, how'd you get here? It would never occur to me. Questions to me mean someone's interested, excited, eager, and passionate about what they're doing.
All right. So I guess the consensus is to ask questions. And looking, so right now, how many years have you been at Twitter?
It's 2.5 years now.
2.5. So like, I know the first 6 months, obviously you're onboarding, but overall, like, what's the biggest difference between the first year to the second year working?
First year to second year definitely was a shift in the type of work I was taking on. I think for the first year, there was a real focus on me shipping a lot of code. And it was about getting me comfortable working in the code base, writing a lot of code, getting reviewed by my mates, learning from those reviews, and really just building up that base level of understanding and experience. In year 1 to 2, it became more about, there was still a lot of that, but I started taking on more responsibilities that weren't as grounded in the code. So it's about writing and designing features that we might be building out. So it was writing a 1-page document, sort of outlining a decision and naming the risks associated with it, naming the pros and cons, and sort of leading the team through discussions as we tried to figure out how we wanted to build something. And so I started to get trusted with these higher level responsibilities of sort of bigger aspects of the product, as opposed to just like we want you to implement this or implement that, and where they're sort of more straightforward.
Okay, so it's more like thought work versus, hey, just like hands-on. And then is there, I know you said you're about to like start mentoring someone, but has there been more of like other sort of leadership opportunities that they've exposed you to?
Yeah, I think sort of more recently, it's been getting my hands a little bit on more cross-functional work, working with other teams, which was super nerve-wracking for me. I'll be honest, that is the place I still to this day feel most exposed, where I'm trying to design something for my team and we've got dependencies with other teams. So I'm sending a Slack message to someone I've never met. They have no idea who I am. And I have to be like, look, hey, our team's trying to do this. Like, I hope I don't sound like an idiot right now and that I'm asking something super straightforward. But that sort of branching out and starting to build things that aren't just self-contained, but are sort of leveraging a lot of it's the joy of working at a 4,000 or 5,000 person company.
Yeah.
Like, there are people working on all sorts of different things. And when you start to stitch together the various aspects, that's when it gets really, really cool, when you can start to build some really fun stuff.
Yeah, it's like, it's not just affecting you anymore. You know, it's beyond those pet projects, those side projects. It's now like, hey, like if I change this, like I have to get approval from this team, because it's affecting everyone. And then with the teams themselves, how big is your team?
So we've got 11 engineers now. We're getting to the point where we're going to probably split pretty soon.
Okay.
We've been talking about it. Big. Yeah, my poor manager, he's doing a lot, but it's because we're taking on new responsibilities. Twitter as a company is really trying to grow in a sort of smart, sustainable way, but really we set ambitious goals as a company and are trying to hit them, and it takes investing in building out our teams.
Of course, and with your 11 engineers, are you working a lot with product managers and designers, or is it more kind of siloed?
Yeah, so it's we have 1 PM process of trying to bring on a second. We work with the designer super closely. And we also work with QA engineers to assure this quality assurance engineers who both build automated testing to ensure that our products are, or sort of whatever we're building on top of our code base isn't breaking things, while also working with some offshore teams to manually test our services. And it's a team effort. Usually we try and let product and design run a couple months ahead of engineering so that they're sort of laying the foundation that we can then build on top of. But it's a lot of give and take, a lot of team meetings and conversations where people are bringing their different perspectives to the table. But I definitely appreciate that it's conversations we sort of have team, and that it's involving sort of all those voices.
Yeah, and that shows again, the importance of soft skills, because so that's going back to the initial networking stuff we were highlighting. You have to be talking to people, whether it be to get your initial job or in the actual job. Otherwise, you can't really get much done.
For sure. I mean, it's why you sell yourself as a full person. You're not just the technical skills you have.
Exactly. You got to know how to express them. So looking forward for you, you see any like management in your future, or like what are you thinking?
I don't know. I think we had our end of year reviews in December, and I was talking with my manager, and had recently gotten promoted, so moving up that IC ladder.
What was the project?
It was just from our like software engineer level 1 to level 2. Thank you. It was a big step for me. And it was sort of a marker of like, okay, I can move up this individual contributor ladder. But it's definitely starting to ask those questions of, is the work that I'm doing the work that I want to be doing 5 years from now? Maybe not. Maybe. Who knows? I need to think more about that. And one of the things I did when I was playing squash was I tried to set sort of check-in points for myself.
Yeah.
Just for those big sort of life decision. I found in squash, it came back to, I was going through some serious ups and downs. I'd lose a match and just feel awful and just want to give it up. And I'd have a great match one day and feel like there wasn't anything I ever wanted to do but play squash. And the high and low of that style was just like, you can't be making life decisions based on that cadence, because you're constantly going to be flung back and forth, and it's going to keep you from being able to put in the just day in, day out methodical effort that's necessary in a career like engineering or in a sport like squash. And so I tried to employ a similar mindset of just like every 3 months check in, am I still doing what I want to be doing? What do I want to be doing a year from now? What do I want to be doing 5 years from now? And I'm pretty clear a year from now, I want to be doing what I'm doing now. But thinking on that longer horizon and working with the mentors and managers around me, and sort of leveraging that internal network I've built at Twitter, it's starting to ask like, what are some things I can do to see if I'm excited about a management track or something else? And so sort of serving as a manager for a mentor for a new member of our team was one of those things that my manager sort of called out as like, this is a way for you to start to feel out, is this something that excites you? Do you sort of derive value from that type of work?
Yeah.
Or are you going to be more excited designing systems, writing code? And it changes. Like sort of when I was 6 months in, I was like, I'm in it for the long haul. Like 5-year mark, I'm going to be coding still. I'm going to be an IC. And it changes, but you just keep that routine of checking in with yourself. And then when it's not a check-in point, you just sort of put your head down and keep chugging along, keep working, keep growing, keep learning.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because, you know, sometimes when we're in it, we're like, all right, this, like you said, like, this is what I'll be doing. One second, my camera just went out.
No worries.
But just continue talking. Yeah, like once you're in the middle of it, you know, it's like you think that's what you're going to be doing forever. But in actuality, you have to always be assessing: is this what I really love? Is this even the right company? Like, is there another, maybe a smaller company that maybe I'd be performing at like more better? So I think that's a good point you brought up. Looks like we got a question. So let's see, from Emily. How is working remotely compared to previously working in the office?
Yeah, it was a tough transition. I think from a company level, there was a lot of time and energy spent toward making sure the tools we had supported working from home. Just like working off of a VPN, everything was a bit slower. And how do we make that something that we could function? But also just in going back to the asking questions, it took getting over that fear of being sort of thought of as not good enough and sort of fighting against that imposter syndrome to send that Slack message of like, can you hop in a Google Meet? Can we chat about this?
Yeah.
Or like, how do you do this over Slack? I think it's just a lot easier to turn to the person next to you and ask a question. You can look at them and you can see, are they in it? Are they working really hard and it's not a time to disturb them? Or are they reading email and you can pull them away for a second? I think I had to just get a little bit more assertive and just asking for that help. And so it was tough for the first couple weeks. And then I think, like everyone's experienced, you just sort of settle into what this new normal is.
Yeah, no, I think that's also like extra important now, because I talked to a bunch of companies, and when I ask them like, what are you looking for when you're hiring, they say with remote work, communication. And that's why even now, like the behavioral interview is probably more important than the technical one, because like, can this person communicate with me every day remotely and like make a connection with our team if we're not like in the same office? So I think that's, again, people, I guess, focus on those soft skills. So before we get to the close, just want to remind everyone in the audience, if you want to join our community, go to apprentice.co/bootcampgrads and you can join there. But I always like to close the show by asking our guest a question that probably every bootcamp grad wants to know. So if you were coming out right now into the job market, just graduated bootcamp, what is your plan that'll get you a job fast?
I think it's a combination of work on some side project that excites you, that you want to talk about in a job interview. Get hired, but also just you want to have something that's fresh where you're learning new things, solving new problems, so that you don't walk into that interview and it's just like, what have you done since you graduated? And it's like, oh, I'm catching up on life. It was pretty intense. I think that sends red flags of like, oh, it may not be true, but you sound like someone who's sort of just in the boot camp to like get the job, get the sort of benefits, and you're not in it for the learnings and for the just day in day out grind of getting better. So I definitely recommend having a project that's all yours, or work with, if you went to a boot camp, have a cohort, work with a couple other people, build something you think's cool. It's super helpful, and just don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I think in conversations I've had, I've talked to some people that I think waited a little too long because they didn't feel like they were quite ready. And I think it's important to know that like, you're not gonna be ready. Like, You have gone through this super intense experience, and it is just about getting to be that like minimal viable product someone can take a chance on. Because once you get into the professional environment, you're getting challenges every day. You're getting new tickets. You're writing code. You're getting it reviewed by experienced engineers. That's when you start to level up. That's when you start to really take off as your skill set. And boot camps are great, but they don't replace that, and I don't think they claim to. But if you sort of graduate from the boot camp, don't feel like you're quite ready, spend another 3-6 months like trying to refine your skills, you're going to get better, but not to the level that it really is going to make that much of a meaningful difference to sort of somebody looking at you from a professional setting. And now it's not oh, look what you were able to accomplish in 5 months or in 3 months in a boot camp. Like, that's really impressive. I can't wait to see what you could accomplish in 2 years of working at our company.
Yeah.
Instead, you've been doing this for a year and this is what you know, or you've been doing this for 2 years, this is what you know. That you sort of, your potential starts to potentially get some questions. And so I think it's important to really just try and, you just need one company to say yes. I got a lot of no's, and it hurt. Yeah. But when you get that one yes, it makes them all feel a lot better. And it's sort of, once I started the job, that was when I really started to grow as an engineer and pick up my skills.
All right. Well, there you have it, everyone. So I guess to summarize those 2 lessons, it's definitely, keep growing and definitely be yourself, because people want a teammate, not a robot. But yeah, so again, thank you so much, Sam, for spreading this knowledge, telling us about early days at Twitter, explaining squash, and just giving us your general advice and telling us what an early career in tech looks like. So everyone, I hope you have a great night, and thank you for joining. Until next week.